So I'm not Cory Booker. I know he's supposed to come out, but I'm not him. But I was asked today to talk about connections, and I'm a CEO of a public company. We have about 600 people in the company, and it's interesting. I woke up about 2 years ago, and as we grew to about 500 employees, I realized that maybe we were starting to get disconnected. And so I'll ask you guys a question. Do you remember in high school when you were, I don't know if any of you had this experience, where you're going to get picked for a team, or if you're girls, it's going to get picked for the clique? And I remember this. I was staying there, and it was touch football. Excuse me? I forgot. I'm a chauvinist pig. There I am. I admit it. So when girls, do you remember girls when you were going to get picked for football? And you stood there? So because I wanted to personalize this, I was a guy. And I stood there. I was a scrawny little kid. And I remember sitting there, and they were picking the teams, and everything happened. And then I didn't get picked. Has anyone here never gotten picked for a team? Yeah, you're geeks like me. So you have really two reactions. One reaction is you're sad. And actually, I don't know about you guys, I cried. I didn't cry in front of the other guys or the girls, but I walked away and I cried. The other emotion you have is like, one day I'm going to build a company and show them that I can have my own group of people and I don't need them, right? And so when I think about the idea of connection between people, and when you have that type of emotional response, where does that come from? Right? Where does it come from? So it was interesting. About 2 years ago, I started to research this, because when you're building a company, it's all about people. And there's this great body of research by this scientist called Paul MacLean. And he was a Yale scientist. In 1960, he started to study the brain. And what he realized is that the brain is not, even though we know it's two halves and it's got pieces, he actually started to realize that there are actually three separate brains that exist. And what he came to discover, and he put out a body of work in 1990 called The Brain Evolution, is that there's this thing called the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is actually physically about here. It sits about here. And it's the first brain. It was the brain that we had when we started on Earth. And when you look at this brain, it's the brain that actually drives a lot of our behavior. It's the emotional part. It's the fight or flight part of our brain. So it was interesting. When you look at what happened at the beginning of time with man, we were in groups. We were in small groups. And what would happen is, if you were told you can't be part of this group, it meant certain death. It meant you were going to die. So when we get this emotional response today about, I'm not part of a group, or I don't feel connected to another human being, we have such a deep emotional response to it because it actually relates to us potentially dying. Even though we know, logically, we're not going to die because I didn't get on the football team. The interesting thing about that, there's a flip side, which is disconnection. War, when we think of war and how wars are waged, it's usually two people or two groups of people that feel very, very disconnected in the world. And what do? They come together to connect. And unfortunately, when they come together, they do it through violence. So human beings, at the core of our brains, at the core of our natures, we need to connect to other human beings. We need to have a deep connection. And we're going to get it through violence, or we're going to get it through some other way. So this kind of brought me down the path of, when we looked at the company, we hit about 500 employees. We have 300 people in Israel. We've got 100 people here, and they're scattered. We started to see some things of behavior. One thing is that groups started to form. Okay, so yes, people wanted to form groups, but they were very siloed. The sales team has their own group, and professional services, and we even see fighting starting to happen, and bureaucracy starts. Okay, so what we started to look at is this wasn't creating a very healthy environment, and we started down this path of saying there's got to be something better, and that drove us to this idea of creating meaningful connections. What we came out with as a company, about 400 of us at the time, a little over 400 got together, and we said, what's important to us as people? And we said, it's creating meaningful connections. And today, this is our mission in life as a company. We want to create meaningful connections with each other, with our customers, and our software, if you don't know, we do all the chat on the internet for customer support. So when you go to like Apple's website or AT&T, and you see that click here to chat, that's my company's technology, and it also promotes connection between people. So what happened was, we said, well, how are we going to create connection? How are we going to get all of us to be equal in creating connection? And the first thing we thought was what? Well, let's party. Let's party, right? It's like, let's just go out and drink. Like, if we go out and drink all the time and party, you always create cool connection. And if you drink a lot, sometimes you get a real special connection happening with people. So as we were working on the party mentality, we started to realize that that's not going to do it in our day-to-day activities. So what we started to realize, and I once again did some research, and I found this guy, Peter Block. If you want to read an amazing book or a piece of a volume of literature, Peter has written a book called Community. And for about 35 years, he's written about connection and community between people. And his book, Community, talks about how can you foster a connection within a corporate environment, but also in your local communities. And so we started to work with his framework, and we started to realize, and his basic philosophy is this. When you get together as groups, like meetings, take some time to get to know each other. Now, when you think about it, which always is strange to me, we spend more time with each other in our companies than we do with our families, than with our friends. And yet, do we really know the people we work with? And so what Peter said was, well, there's a way to kind of get to that connection. And where it starts with is getting to know people as people. So it's funny, when I interview people for jobs, sometimes a question is, I'll ask them, how have you helped someone in your life? And they'll say, well, in my corporate life or in my personal life? And I always ask, what's the difference? Because in essence, we're all human beings. When we come to work, we come with our problems, we come with our insecurities, we come as people. So what the goal of the exercise of connecting is really to get to know someone as a person. And most of the time in a company, we don't do that. So how do you do that? It's really simple. You get together, one or two people, and you ask each other questions that will enable an answer to come out that will allow me to get to know you a little bit better. So what I want to do is actually get you guys to do one of these questions quickly. So here's the question. The question we usually ask to create the connection is, what's a crossroad in your life? Okay? So what I want you to do is turn to someone quickly and just say, what's a crossroad in your life? And say, a crossroad in my life is X. Now, the thing is, as you're listening to this question, don't try to problem solve it. Just let them speak. Shake your head. Yes, I don't like my husband. He's a slob. Oh, great. Awesome. Don't say, so is mine, and I don't feed him dinner. Just shake your head, you know? And the reason is the question should evoke anxiety and make you actually speak about something personal, and it also should have no right or wrong answer. So do me a favor really quickly if you can. It's a very, I know, difficult question. Turn to someone next to you. What is a crossroad in your life? And let's do it for 1 minute. What's a crossroad in your life? The crossroad in my life is here. Okay. Okay. One minute. Okay, so but matter of fact, just 1 minute. So if you noticed a couple of things, and I recommend this, and actually if you have time, it's a great thing to do outside of this and do into your own companies. You can feel the energy rise, you can feel how maybe someone created something a little bit more deeper with you. I remember the first time it happened with me, a guy turned to me and said, you know, I'm having problems in my life with my wife and so forth and so on. And I remember one thing, the next time he came to a meeting, I looked at him like a person. And I think if we can create these types of connections and understand people as who they are as people, the world can be a better place. So thank you.